It's my pleasure to be joined today by Christy Zito, who is running for Senate in District 8. Christy, thanks for joining me.
Oh, thanks for having me, Brian. I'm honored that you would have me on your show. I admire your work and always have, so I'm pretty
Thank you.
thrilled.
I appreciate it. So, tell us how you got here. What's your life story? What's your background? What's the journey that brought you to the point where you're, well, not only standing for election to the legislature, but doing it again?
Well, my life story is really unremarkable. I was born in Tremont, Utah. My dad's a first generation American. His parents immigrated here from Albania. I grew up, my grandparents had a ranch in Stone, Idaho, and my family on my dad's side were row crop farmers in Tremont. And so I feel like I grew up having the best of two worlds. Loved horses. If you would have told me when I was 16 years old that I would ever have a life without a horse, in my backyard, I would have said no, that life didn't turn out that way. I think one of my greatest accomplishments is to be a mom. That's been, my children are my gift to the world and my gift to the future. And that's the thing that I'm the most pleased with that I was able to do. I have 5 children, 3 boys and 2 girls, and now I have 11 grandchildren. And I can't think of anything in the world better than that. So we lived in Tremont until I was 42, raised most of my kids down there except my youngest daughter. And then we moved to Idaho to farm. And, life is full of its challenges and things happen. And I served on the school board in Glenns Ferry. I was PTA president in Utah. And I would never, ever in a million years have dreamed that I would end up serving in the Idaho House of Representatives and in the Idaho Senate. That was not part of my aspiration. I had no political, inclinations at all. I ran for school board because someone came to me and they said, "We think you would do a good job." I was actually homeschooling my daughter at the time. And so, people thought that that was a little weird, but I would always point out to them that I care not just about my child and her education, but the education of all of the children in our community is important. And as a school board member, I believe it's your job to make sure that the curriculum and the things that happen in your school, are in line with the values and beliefs of our community and of our state. Because, schools are so important. They have our children more hours a day than we do, our public school system does. And I think it's really important to keep an eye on what happens there. So that's why I chose to serve on the school board. And the same with I was a PC. I was the Hammett precinct committee person, but someone came to me and asked me if I would run for that position. And yeah, I was familiar with it, but I didn't really know. But I said, okay, yeah, I'll do that because, then I can learn a little bit more and maybe have a little bit of an influence. But running for state office, never even considered it. And then that same person came to me one day and they said, "There's several of us that would like you to run for the House of Representatives in Idaho, for that seat." And I'm like, no, that's not something. Well, you were the Friends of NRA chairman and, you were really good and this and that. And I'm like, well, I appreciate that. But, the state coordinator, he's really good and he makes us all look good. But no, but it takes a lot of on the ground work and stuff. And you stand up for our Second Amendment rights and we think you should do it. So I talked to my youngest daughter who just turned 18, talked to my other family members, prayed a lot about it. And it's just like everything that started to happen in my life started to direct me to, yeah, that's what you're going to do. Never ran a political campaign, knew nothing about running a political campaign, knew nothing about fundraising, nothing. But people stepped up, it all fell into place. I'm convinced that, there was divine intervention and guidance. And so here we are.
Here you are. And not only did you win that race, you won re-election in the House. Then you came over to the Senate for a term, and now you're wanting to go back in the Senate again.
Well, yeah, and I retired from the Senate to work for the Idaho Second Amendment Alliance because that is a very important issue to me, among others. But when I had the opportunity, because I don't believe we should homestead these positions, I believe that you should serve your time and then move on. and if you still feel like you should serve your community, there are a lot of other ways to do it. So I basically termed myself out when the opportunity came to do, to continue to do good and to continue to fight for our rights, just in a different venue. I took that opportunity, but now I'm working to come back.
I'm looking at a map of your district on the other screen over here, and it might be the biggest district in Idaho. I don't know what the actual geography is, but it's big. Valley County, Custer County, Boise County, and Elmore County. That's, yeah, it's 10 minutes away from me here in District 14 in Eagle, but it also extends all the way almost to Twin Falls, all the way almost to the Montana border, and then all the way up past McCall. How on earth, I guess two questions. How on earth is it even possible for one state senator to represent that vast of a district? And, along the same lines, how are you campaigning in such a vast district?
I put a lot of miles on my truck, you know, and I spend a lot of time on the phone. So I was in Valley. I had 2 meet and greets in Mountain Home last week and 2 events in Valley County that I went to last week. And then I spend a lot of hours on the phone. I was on the phone with a gentleman from Centerville. I don't know if you know where that is in Boise County. And I was on the phone with him for like 2.5 hours discussing access to public lands and whether the state should buy lands when they come for sale to keep them open to the public and different things like that. And, because the issues that are important to the people in that county should be important to me.
Mhm.
And I plan to represent Elmore, Boise Valley, Custer County well by understanding and knowing the issues that are important to the people there. So I spend a lot of time listening to the people in this legislative district talk about what's important to them. Now, I don't have to be the smartest person in the room, and I'm really glad that I'm not, because the day that I stop being willing to learn and understand and being open to those conversations, that's the day I should turn myself out again. So that's how I plan to do it. I travel a lot. I'm on the phone a lot. I answer a lot of emails, and that's how I'm covering the ground.
It is a wide, vast, and diverse district, but um, I would guess that a good chunk of the population lives down in Mountain Home. Are you spending a lot of time down there meeting the people?
Yes, I've got 2 meet and greets a week. Well, let's see, one every week at the deli, and then, excuse me, every other week at the in church in Mountain Home. So, we're doing those 2 venues. I'm there. Faye Thompson comes there. Our sheriff was there last night. We have a couple of PCs that are running for office to show up. Zito for Idaho hosted it. For anybody that's basically running for office in legislative district or in the Mountain Home area that want to come and meet with their potential constituents can. Because how else are you going to know if you don't meet with the people? You can go to the legislature and you've got lobbyists there and bureaucratic agencies there that all have an agenda and all want something. I'm there to lobby for the people. And I have a proven record of doing that. I have a conservative voting record that proves that I vote for the people. I have a reputation for listening to the people. I forget where I was the other day and in which county I was in. And someone came up to me and they said, during COVID, you helped my wife get her unemployment benefits. Brian, I was on the phone hours and hours every day because I'm not exactly sure what happened with the unemployment system other than it was totally overloaded. People weren't getting their benefits. Some people would get their benefits and then they would need it to be paid back. It was just crazy. But people would call me or email me. I answered every phone call. I answered every email. And I forwarded every email to Janie Revere, who was over the Department of Labor at that time. And I don't know, maybe a couple thousand phone calls and stuff. But I had completely forgot about all of this, until he said, yeah, you helped my wife. But that's our job. We are servants to the people. People will say, well, they're leaders. Well, in a way, yes. But more than that, more than anything else, I see myself as a servant to the people. I'm you when I'm sitting in that seat at the legislature. I am your voice. I'm the one person there that lobbies for you. I don't lobby for any organization or any bureaucratic agency. I lobby for the people of the state of Idaho, and I have a fiduciary responsibility over where their hard-earned tax-paying dollars go. And so I just work hard to be that voice and to listen.
So as you've been listening to the citizens of District 8, all the way from, up north, down south, east and west, what are you hearing from people right now? What are the concerns or issues that are most important to people, and what are they looking for from the legislature?
I hear a lot about the border right now. People are really worried about what's happening on the border because it affects us in so many different ways. Um, it affects our like our health and welfare department. It affects our housing. People are worried about it being a small invasion. I mean, we don't know where these people are coming from. I get calls about people seeing buses unloading people in our legislative district and in our state. So I hear a lot about that. I still hear a lot about the property tax issue. People spend their whole entire lives paying for their homes, and then when they retire, they have no control over what happens with the property taxes. They just keep going up and up and up. And a lot of people have to sell their home of 50 years because they can't afford to keep it because of the taxes anymore. On social issues, I hear a lot about the business with the transgender thing with our children. People are concerned about that. People are concerned about publicly funded institutions not keeping pornography and stuff out of the hands of our children. People believe that our libraries and such that are publicly funded should be held to the exact same standard as like the grocery store. They have to keep those kinds of magazines and stuff in a different area, not accessible to children. No one's saying burn a book. No one's saying take the books out of the library. No one's saying censor what books are there. What people are saying is this is the moral standard of our society. And we want that moral standard maintained. We want our children protected from stuff that they're not mentally and emotionally ready for. So those are about four of the issues that, as I've gone around, I've heard. In Valley County and Boise County, they're concerned about the access and the public land thing, because that happens in Elmore County, but not quite as much as it does in Boise and Valley County. So those are the things that I've been hearing. Those are the discussions that I've been having with people.
And I'm looking at this map here, and it's got a shaded area for federal or state land, and it looks like almost the entirety of Boise County and Valley County is national forest, except for a corridor around the highway. And then Elmore County, you've got that plus another area down south, the Snake River Birds of Prey area, and then over in Custer County, that's looks like probably 80% of your district is set aside in one way or another. How do you address that? What are people wanting, and what do you think the legislature should do?
The biggest thing that I'm hearing people wanting is to ensure that they have access to those public lands. That right now is the biggest thing I'm hearing. It's unfortunate that 63, I think, percent of the state of Idaho is under control of federal or state in some way or another, mostly federal. That's 63% of our state that's not producing raw income for the citizens of the state of Idaho. It's under the control of an outside entity. And to me, that's not an appropriate way for it to be. Yeah, there should be maybe some public lands, like some forests and stuff like that. The federal government really constitutionally is not supposed to own property. Just a very specific, very defined area of land, as it states in the Constitution. So I really struggle with that. I think people have kind of given up on the fight that they'll ever have those federally managed lands back into private control. So now they're just really concerned about being able to access them. And that's what I'm hearing the most about is the access on that public lands when we're talking about the public land situation. I think they want the legislature to protect that. I want the legislature to pass legislation in whatever form that might look like to make sure that those lands are open and accessible.
That's a big issue. Speaking of big issues, you mentioned the border. Obviously, at the national level, the border is a mess. It's, the current presidential administration has been just exacerbating the issue, inviting people in, and that's affecting our state. And obviously, during the legislative session this year, there was contentious debate over it. Uh, there were two memorials. One of them was really harsh. It called out the big agricultural producers for hiring, wanting to keep the cheap labor coming in. The other one was more from the perspective that we need reform of the immigration system and we need more visas so that more foreign workers could come work. And right in the middle of it was this report that said 35,000 uh, people working in Idaho are here illegally. Uh, I remember uh, one of the incumbents from your district on the House side said that there are no, farmers aren't hiring illegals, but then someone else from Eastern Idaho said, actually, there's illegals working here, whether you like it or not, and our system relies on their presence. So what do we do? How do we address this issue, both from a standpoint of making sure that our whole economy doesn't fall apart, but at the same time, enforcing our laws?
Well, I think it's the first thing that we need to do is we need to impress upon people, and especially our youth, that the word work is not a dirty four-letter word, and that you don't have to have a college degree. Not that that's a bad thing, but you don't have to have a college degree to be successful. That if you're working and you're productive, you're taking care of your family, you're paying your bills, you're paying your taxes, you're being a good citizen, it doesn't really matter what you do. It can be fulfilling. I think that's part of the first problem that we have. The second thing is there are illegals working in the state of Idaho. We have an H-2A program where people can get a work visa, they can come here, but it adds a level of accountability to the farmers that use that program. They have to provide housing, transportation from Mexico or wherever these people come from, back to Mexico or wherever they come from when they're done. They come seasonally, that they can also have people come for, staggered times. And the program works well because those people who come here to work are not in slave labor situations. They're treated fairly, they're treated humanely, they're paid a living wage, their housing has to be inspected and up to standard. So it's not a bad program. It's not a bad program at all. And it works. I know farmers who have many H-2A workers that come and work on their farms. And that's what they come seasonally. They have some come in March, they have some come in July, because their farming operation is most of the year. But that's the thing that it does, is there is that level of accountability that you provide decent housing, decent wages, transportation, a phone, so that these people aren't just getting paid $5 an hour or worked more hours than they should. And I'm not pointing fingers and I'm not accusing anybody of anything, but that program is there. It's a viable program and it does work. Should there be an easier pathway to citizenship? Yes, our citizenship, I don't think it's something that should just be handed out willy-nilly. I know my grandparents went through the steps to become citizens. I know a lot of other people did, probably somewhere in your past, in your history, your ancestors did. It's a privilege to live in a country like this. It's a privilege to live where people want to come here to be free, to be able to live their lives as they see fit, to be able to worship as they see fit. It makes me really sad to think that there are people that come to this country because of the social benefits that they'll get. My people came here to work. My people came here because they felt like it was a privilege to work and live in a country where they could experience freedom. They didn't have a government telling them which religion they should worship, what they were going to do when they grow up. They had the opportunity to become whatever it was they wanted to become if they were willing to work hard enough to do it. And those are the kind of people we want here, not someone who's looking for your tax dollars to take care of them. And I'm not saying that everybody that crosses the border is that way. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that if a country doesn't have a secure border, it's not a country. It's part of the country that they share a crossway back and forth with. And I don't want to see that for our country.
Looking at some of the other issues out there, I believe you briefly touched on taxes, property taxes especially. That's I see it as a very complex issue because there's what 10 dozen different taxing agencies that levy property taxes here on me, and I'm sure it's similar in your community. The legislature passed a bill last year that reduced it a little bit, and then this year the governor's school facilities bill, it shifts some of it from property taxes to sales tax. What can be done? Is there a way to completely eliminate property taxes, or is there a way to reform it? Where do we go from here?
Yeah, that is, like you said, such a very convoluted subject, and I don't have the answers. I wish I could say, this is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to make it work. Our taxes, our property taxes, are based in part on how much we spend. Our city budgets, our county budgets, like you mentioned, the taxing districts. I think there are over 400 taxing districts across the state of Idaho. And when you get your tax bill, they're all listed on your tax bill. There's mosquito abatement, garbage, sewer. No, sewer is not a taxing district.
Here it is.
Is that okay? I was thinking about here. I don't think it is here. There are a lot of things that we pay for. There are rec districts. There are all kinds of things that we pay for. Bonds and levies. Yes, to a point, we have said as taxpayers, we want these goods and services, and they do have to be paid for. And I think that's where our responsibility as citizens come in, is we have to look at what we expect government to provide for us. If we expect the government to provide these things for us, we have to pay for them. Nothing is free, no matter what any administration will tell you. There's no such thing as free money. I heard a mayor candidate here not too long ago say, "Oh, I don't mind spending money on the city, but I never spend the taxpayers' money." And I'm like, then where are you getting this money? I didn't ask that question, but where do you get the money? It's all taxpayer money, no matter where it comes from. So we have to look at that. We have to look at what is it we really want? What is it we really expect from our government? And then we have to understand that we have to pay for that. I like the way they do it in California, that when you purchase a piece of property, that's where the property taxes stay until you sell it. When I asked that question, why we can't do that in Idaho, and the way I understand it, it would take a constitutional amendment to make that change. Well, why not? We've amended the Constitution before, and it is a very important issue.
I'll bet that would be popular.
I think it might.
Yeah. When we talk of taxes and what they go to, obviously 2 years ago the legislature passed the launch grant, which is what $80 million essentially given to trade schools and companies to train their workers. And there's obviously a lot of debate on that. And one thing I've noticed, especially as this election plays out, is that there's a divide between the self-proclaimed liberty and conservative organizations and the business organizations. When you look at endorsements from IACI and endorsements from, say, Idaho Freedom Pack, there's really no overlap there. And it seems like over the last 30, 40 years, there's become this divide in the conservative movement where we once believed that we just support business unconditionally because that's the free enterprise, free market, as opposed to government and central planning. But now there's concerns that businesses are too powerful, too influential. And yet if you oppose them, if you say, well, I don't support something like the launch grant, you're accused of being anti-business. So how do you navigate that in this day and age? How do you make sure that businesses are unfettered from too much government regulation, but without giving them too much influence and too many carve-outs and subsidies?
Well, I think that the government's role in business is to protect. See, how am I going to phrase this? So the launch program doesn't protect a business's ability to do business. The launch program is providing a service that the businesses themselves, if they want to sponsor people to learn their trades, they can intern them, they can do their own scholarships within their businesses. There's a dozen different things they can do that way. What these businesses are doing is they are asking you and I and our friends who pay taxes to pay to train their future employees. Well, I would rather pay for the education of my children and my grandchildren and me decide who I'm going to help train and educate, if that's what I so choose to do, rather than to have the government tell me that I'm going to pay for the training for these specific businesses and then use everybody's tax dollars. that is not making sure that businesses can operate and that the free enterprise market is staying viable and safe and healthy. That's not. That is, and I'm not even sure what word to use to describe what I'm thinking here, other than it's basically in my mind a redistribution of wealth. You're taking my tax dollars to train workers for this business over here, when that should be my choice and my decision, what I do with my money, where I donate it, what charities I look at. It's not the proper role of government to make that decision for me.
That really is I think, a divide even within the Republican Party about what is the proper role of government. Should it just be limited to protecting life, liberty, and property, or are there things that the government can do to help people? Whether it's a whole, launch grant is one of those, but also emergency medical services, or the CHIPS Act at the federal level, trying to keep manufacturing here, or at least that's what they say it was about. Um, you know, how, again, how do you navigate that when some people in the Republican Party want to use government for what they see as good intentions? And, if you don't, then people think that you're just against those things.
Well, and no matter what you do, no matter how hard you try, there's somebody somewhere that you're going to make mad. There's somebody somewhere that's not going to like what you do. You just have to set your compass that this is what I believe the proper role of government is, and stick with it. And if we live in a society where those conservative values, those basic, long-time conservative values don't fit what people want anymore, then you're not going to get elected into office. But if what I believe and the values that I believe in and what I stand for are what the people want, the people who vote, the people who pay the taxes, then I'll get elected into office, or other people who think like me. And it's where we are as a society to a great point when those decisions are made. I'm not anti-business at all. Do I think that we should maintain a police force? Absolutely, I think we do. Do I think that we should maintain roads and bridges? Absolutely, I think that we should. When I was growing up, people looked at Idaho and Utah, where I grew up, as great places to come and have their businesses, to set up manufacturing, to bring their businesses to, because we had an amazing workforce. The people in the state where I grew up, they had a reputation of wanting to work, of being good employees, of having a fantastic work ethic. And Idaho did as well. Those are the reasons that businesses should come to our state, because our people have the same values as the businesses that come here. Do I think that businesses should get huge tax breaks? Why should a business be taxed any different than every man and woman who works hard to bring home a paycheck? Yeah, maybe there are some benefits. They're bringing jobs and bringing this and bringing that, but they bring other things with them as well, because with those businesses and with those more people, the infrastructure is hit harder. More people mean more law enforcement. So there's a balance there. Businesses should come here because they want to add to our communities, not because we give them a handout.
There are a lot of complex issues in the legislature that you come across, and some of them I'd say are easy. If you get a gun bill, usually it's pretty cut and dried how you're going to vote on that. Abortion, same thing. But there are many other issues that are really complex, and there are pros and cons on both sides. So, having been there before, how do you, as a legislator, make a decision like that? Who do you talk to? Who do you consult? What resources would you use to navigate a complex issue?
Well, one of the things that I do is, when I was in the legislature before, I had this sign on my wall, and it was about the lens that you should look through for every piece of legislation that you're going to vote on. So, who does it help and who does it hurt? Just because it's legal, is it moral? Is it constitutional? What do my constituents think about it? How will it affect their lives? So those are some basic things there, and especially the constitutionality of something. So when I'm going to vote on a piece of legislation, I look at it through that lens and I analyze it myself that way. Then if I have questions, I'll go talk to the sponsor of the legislation. I'll go talk to someone who maybe opposes that legislation so that I can get a balance on both sides. Then there are always usually people behind it, like there's the bureaucratic agency, or there's a citizen who cares about it and is involved in it. I like to visit with those people. I like to get the opinions of a lot of different people who are involved in it and who are knowledgeable about a specific piece of legislation so that I can make a good educated decision about whether to vote for it or vote against it.
I have to say, watching committee hearings and debates, I sometimes appreciate our Democrat friends because they're usually trying to defeat good conservative legislation, and they're going to throw everything they can at it,
Mhm.
and that really helps clarify the argument. Okay, this is the arguments against. So how do we sharpen our arguments for?
Exactly. I appreciate it as well. And I appreciate Republicans who vote against pieces of legislation. I am like you. I enjoy listening to the debate. I enjoy hearing the pros, the cons, the why we should, the why we shouldn't. And there should be robust debate because these decisions affect people's lives. We're not just passing a bill to say that we did something, to say that, oh, I went to the legislature and I passed 14 pieces of legislation that do this and this and this. Look how wonderful I am to you. I would rather go back to my constituents and maybe say, I didn't run any legislation, but this is what I voted against. And this is how I influenced people to really understand what was happening with this piece of legislation. Because there are well-intended pieces of legislation that have really ill consequences.
Mhm.
We may say, oh, well, it's for the kids, or oh, it's for this, or it's going to help that person, or it's going to do this, or it's going to do that. But what are the unintended consequences? And we always have to look at that, and we always have to weigh that.
Now, when you were there before, I was just starting to pay attention to the legislature when you were there. So um, I do recall that you were often standing alone or with very few you know, on your principles. Uh, do you expect it to be the same when you're back in, or do you think that there's been more conservative, support in the legislature so that you might have a much stronger team this time?
I think the House is about the same as it was when I served in the House. I think there's been a huge shift in the Senate. And if all of the people that are there now that vote conservative and that stand up for those principles of constitutionality and fiscal conservancy, if they hold their seats, I hope that I can just add one more voice to that because the Senate is very, very different from when I was there before. Very different.
Well, that does bring up one question I meant to ask earlier. Uh, you served some time in the House, served some time in the Senate. As you say, you retired, but now you're back. What inspired you to decide to get back into the arena?
I was really happy doing what I was doing. I was working for the Second Amendment Alliance. We're making a difference, protecting and defending and restoring full constitutionality to our Second Amendment rights. But then as soon as the first legislative session ended and people started to see how the current Legislative District 8 senator votes, my phone started to ring. And, we are still, even though we're as diverse as we are, this is a very conservative legislative district. And a lot of people don't like the voting record of the current senator. And so I started to get a lot of phone calls. People would stop at my house. People would stop me in the grocery store. And I'm like, I retired. And they said, no, we would really, really, really like you to come back. So again, I prayed about it. I talked to my family about it. Went through the same processes before. And I'm like, my thought was not just because it's a political race or anything like that, but this is my senator too. And am I happy with what's happening? No. So I made the decision that I would run again.
Well, one thing that I've really enjoyed about living in Idaho these last 6 years is how accessible everyone is. I mean, just the fact that we're having this conversation here, I couldn't have imagined this just a few years ago. But I think Idaho's legislature really does represent what our founders intended for citizens to get involved, play their part, represent their communities, and then depart the stage. And with a few exceptions, most everybody who's in the legislature now has been there less than 10 years. So it's, it's interesting to see how this plays out, and to see somebody who, like you said, you couldn't have imagined that you would be serving in the legislature, but there you are. Uh, so it's been fun to watch.
Well, it is. And we are a citizen legislature. We are a part-time citizen legislature. Farmers, ranchers, store owners, food truck owners, realtors. We should be as diverse, a mom, a grandma. We should be as diverse as our state, as the population of our state. And I think our legislature really is. I think it's a glorious thing. I kind of get excited about when I start thinking about, what we really are and how we really represent it. And I'm like you. I feel like as an elected official, it's my job to be accessible. It's my job to, when someone stops me in the grocery store, to visit with them and listen to their challenges and their issues and what they're concerned about. During COVID, Brian, I would get calls in the middle of the night, and people would just be heartbroken and in tears. And, this one guy calls me and he says, she's going to die. She's going to die. And I said, who's going to die? And he said, my wife's going to die. I said, I can't even go in with her. I can't even hold her hand. We've been married all these years and now she's going to die alone. I would have people call me all twisted up about something, just so upset and almost on the verge of screaming and hollering on the phone. And I would just listen to them. And then at the end of them telling me what was bothering them, I would say, what can I do for you? And they would say, nothing. I feel better already just to know that someone cares enough to listen. And so, those are things that are important to me, is to be that servant legislator, to be the person that I put my jeans on one leg at a time, just like everybody else. I'm approachable. I've been through what you've been through. I've raised a family. I've been poor. I've picked tomatoes and picked sweet corn, and I drove potato truck when my 3 babies were little and put 3 little car seats across the seat, so that I could buy groceries. I've lived just like everybody else. I'm nothing special. I'm a mom and a grandma and a hardworking Idahoan and a proud American. And that's what our legislature should be.
I do appreciate your time. And are there any issues I haven't brought up that you'd like to cover, or just some closing thoughts?
No, I think we did a really good job. I do want to say I enjoyed you at the Valley County Lincoln Day the other night.
Thank you.
That was really great to listen to. Thank you. And I'm looking forward, if it is the will of the people, to serving legislative district in the state of Idaho again. And next to my family, it probably has been one of the greatest honors that I've ever been able to do, to be able to serve the people in this capacity. I pray for our state. I pray for our country, because things are in such disarray. I know a lot of people feel like they're living like just waiting for the other shoe to drop, and that causes a fair amount of stress on society just all on its own. But I believe God has us in his hands. And I believe that no matter what happens, we're going to be okay. And we're all in this together, and we'll get each other through it. And if anybody that's in my district hears this, I would ask for your vote. If you want to talk to me about it, call me on the phone, send me a letter, send me an email, and we'll figure it out. So that's probably about all I have to say.
Christy Zito, candidate for State Senate in District 8. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. God bless.